Hello everyone and welcome back. We are in Sacramento, California for a roll cage on the NSX at RS Motorsport. And that may be a name that's not too familiar to you because it is a new shop that my good friend Riley Stair, who you may recognize from Proto Machine and with the really cool Trans Am, has started up here. So we brought the NSX up. It's been needing some safety and a cage for a long time. Scott came up with me. Thank you for being the company, Scott. So I'm gonna let Riley kind of tell you a little bit about the cage and what our plans are with it. It's been a long time coming and I'm excited to have it up here, and naturally he's pretty much the only person that does fabrication on my car because I'm incredibly particular and his work's incredible. So tell us a little bit about the cage, Riley.
So being that Amir's car is very light and very fast and he's a little crazy, we needed to do something about the cage he had in it before. I've had the pleasure of pushing the car around a little bit, and you know, every time I'd grab it and try and push the car by, it'd move more than the car was moving. So, you know, I've been kind of busting his balls about it a little bit lately, and so we got a bunch of Docal tubing. We're gonna go ahead and do an 1 5/8" Docal cage in it. We tuck it as tight as we can to the car. You know, it's not the easiest car to cage, but we're gonna get it done and hopefully get it done quick so we can get to testing and you know, get off to the first event of the year.
Yeah, I feel like I do this to Riley every time, but I'm like, hey, I need this and I need it in like 4 days. Can you do it? And it's normally like 3 weeks worth of work. So sorry, Riley. I hate to do it to you, but the NSX has its own host of challenges that when putting a cage in it that make it kind of complicated. And I feel bad because Riley's been telling me about all the shitty cages he's had to put in cars. And I'm like, okay, well, here's another one. So we'll kind of go over some of the complicated issues on the cage, why we're using the material we're using, and then show you some of the cool stuff here. And of course, his really awesome Trans Am. So yeah, we'll get to it right now. All right, so we mentioned, Riley mentioned before that we're using a material called Docal in a certain size, and a lot of people haven't heard of Docal. It's actually a really, really cool material, so I'm gonna kind of let him explain what it is and why we're using it. Once he told me about it, it was kind of a no-brainer. So tell us a little about Docal.
So Docal's kind of, it's a tubing that's made specifically for roll cages, because your DOM, your Hiru, that's not really made for roll cages. It's great for them, sure, but Docal's really made specifically for motorsport. So it's, while it is a seam tube, it's a very consistent seam tube. It's electronically TIG welded, and it offers kind of all of the superior strength of chromoly, without really any of the you know, embrittlement factors that chromoly has. So you kind of get the ductility of a DOM or a mild steel tube with the tensile strength of the chromoly. So it's really just kind of a win-win. It is a little bit expensive to get here, but you know, when you're talking about, you know, somebody going as fast as Amir does in the car, or somebody who's really pushing the limits of a chassis, you know, and putting themselves in some amount of peril, you know, even though there's not a tubing allowance, so you can't go thinner on it in a lot of regulating bodies, you know, having the extra strength for the same weight seems like a no-brainer to me. So you know, for this, and then, you know, most of the stuff I do around here, you know, the Docal's kind of the way to go, because at the end of the day, you know, I like building the stuff, but ultimately it's, you know, we're putting somebody's neck on the line, and so you got to go with the best of the best, and this is it right now. So
yeah, so kind of Riley said a lot of things that were very complex and complicated to make it very simple. He's a smart one when it comes to this stuff. It has a lot of the things that you basically take the best out of all materials and combine them into one thing designed specifically for motorsport, and that's what Docal is. It's pretty much all he uses in anything. So I've been really looking forward to using this material since he told me about it. So we're gonna get that done, and I'll show you some of the other kind of like things he's done already. I think we have a roll bar here that's in Docal. So. All right, so as I mentioned before, putting a cage in this car has its own host of challenges that realistically I don't really know that well because I don't build cages, and Riley builds them constantly in cars that are a pain in the ass. So he just mentioned it's not going to be the easiest, and some things were kind of obvious to me. Obviously, it's a small chassis with a small cabin, and everything's at odd angles, but he knows it quite a bit better than me, so I'm going to go ahead and let him explain.
yeah, so as Amir was saying there, it's a very small car, and obviously, when you're building the cage, you want some defensible space for your driver. Obviously, you don't want to be pinned up against the cage, because if there's any deflection, you do end up with the car on its lid. You want a little bit of crush room, a little bit of space, you know. So That's one of the problems, making sure that it's safe, a safe distance, and then also, you know, being an aluminum car, one of the things is the frame rails are on the outside, which is great for landing on them, but you can't really build a plinth box and weld a plinth box into the car. That's generally what you take out and drop the cage and weld the tops of everything, get everything 360-degree welded. On this deal, it's not quite like that. You know, generally you drill holes or something in the floor and pop the cage down through the floor and get your room to weld and pop it back up and put a plate over it, which is an option. It's not my first choice, but we'll have to do some brainstorming there, figure out how to get the cage down to finish weld. Next to that, it's also, you know, your strut towers are actually outside of your driver compartment. So being that there has to be a piece of glass here for Amir's rules and whatnot, you know, we'll have to figure a way to make the cage add-onable, if you will, so it can be expanded upon into a 6-point at some point should you want to move on to a different class. All of that, and as well as making it safe, you know, making sure that we've got you know, enough structure in here with leaving Amir enough room as far as windshield bar and overhead intrusion and whatnot, so that even at a 4-point it's safe. You know, so those are some of the first issues, you know, but we'll have to do some head scratching and some thinking and figure it out and figure it out quick. So.
Yeah, like Riley mentioned, I didn't exactly leave him a lot of time, but another thing which he already kind of covered, which is crucial, is that there is a big thing in future-proofing the cage. So in street class, one of the big things is that you have to have glass in all 4 positions of the car. We also get a special, you know, they allow us Lexan up here because we have a rear glass, but that means that it's very challenging to put a 6-point roll cage in here with glass back there. And I think technically, you know, GTA gives you the option to say, you know, if you want to do it, you can do it. Like, for example, if I want to run pyramid door bars or NASCAR bars here, I can, but I have to basically cut all of this out and keep as much of it as I can. And that kind of translates to the glass. Like, if I wanted to run a 6-point per the rules, they will allow me to run a 6-point that rolls out to these shock towers, but they want me to also get a new piece of glass cut that is basically automotive spec laminated glass and have it cut in a way that the roll cage can travel from here up here to where the 4-point is going to be, and the glass basically slides in perfectly and is still legal to the rules. So obviously that is a massive challenge, especially if you have to service the car, which as you've seen with pretty much all time attack cars, they all need to be serviced. So there's no way that I'm going to basically make it so that way I have to delaminate a glass, because as you might be able to see here, like, this is glue. That's how the glass is, that's how it's held in. I basically have to cut the glass out, unbolt the rear section, which is how you have to do this, so that way you can unbolt the section, and then work on the car. So for street class, it may not be practical for me to do, and I have explained this to Riley, and like he mentioned, he may kind of like notch the body if it's legal to the rules, to kind of run the cage as high as possible. And again, this is for safety more so than anything else. Getting the cage up high gets it away from my head. As you can see, this is pretty low, or there's like the cage would be right here and my head's right here. So if he moves it back here and gets up there, it gives us quite a bit more space, and then we can potentially run rear tubes down here and only have to notch the glass, which is you know, much better than having to cut giant holes in the glass and then put it back in there. But other than that, we'll probably run it as a 4-point for street class and have it completely future-proofed with a 6-point that we can add on to. Once the initial 6 points are on the car, it's much easier to add to, and that's a, you know, a question that I get, and I'm sure Riley gets quite frequently as well, about like adding to a 4-point. Can you explain to the people why that's kind of difficult?
Yeah, so generally, like as I mentioned before with the plinth boxes, so generally you if the cage fits worth a damn, once it's up there and it's finish welded, you can't get to the tops, a lot of the junctions that you need to get to weld your down bars for your 5th and 6th point, or you know, your 7th and 8th point up in the front. You know, you generally want all of your tube joints junctioned or noted so that all of your load paths are pushing on one trajectory down into a chassis mount, something like that. So, you know, picturing that, you come up your A-pillar and you run into your main hoop. Right on the other side of that landing, you want your down bar from your main hoop to your strut tower or your frame rail or whatever it's going to, you know, whatever the case may be. You don't want them offset, because if they're offset a little bit, say, you know, instead of landing, you know, junction, they're offset, and you take an impact in the front of the car, it can actually push that load, that trajectory, and deform that tube, which is not ideal. You don't really want anything, any tube deformation or anything like that. It's just, a potential for something crushing you. So you generally want to plan ahead, make sure that if you are going to add to something, you leave yourself provisions to do so, and you leave yourself space, and in this case, it might be a tube bunk, something to that sort. So
cool. So yeah, I'm very fortunate that I have Riley helping me out with this. He is an expert when it comes to this, and anything that I kind of posed to him as a potential challenge, he's had almost an instant answer for, so that's been very helpful. So that's kind of like the difficulty with putting a cage in this car, some of the challenges in terms of not only the NSX, but also conforming to rules, which is really important. If you are building a car for time attack or any sort of competitive class, it's a good idea to first look at the rules before you start doing anything that's very difficult to reverse, which, for example, putting a cage in this car, if you did it and you screwed up and you had to undo it, you'd basically have to cut out thousands of dollars worth of work. So make sure you're looking at that first and deciding what you want to do and having the car built to a rule set before you just go building stuff. I can't tell you how many people I've seen show up to tech and find out that their car is illegal for the class because they didn't have that foresight. And again, this is something that's it's very common for people that are new to the sport that didn't necessarily think of that. So just as a bit of a tip for that. But fortunately, I'm in good hands. Riley looks at every rule book before, multiple rule books, to make sure the car is legal in different rule sets potentially, while also being safe. So that's looking good. I'm gonna kind of let him get to it and probably look at some of the other stuff in his shop, and probably be here in what is an unreasonable amount of time in how quickly he's going to build this cage and be back here in like a week. So like I mentioned before, Riley just moved into this shop. It is an awesome shop that he did a ton of work to get it to where it is now. He got it a couple months ago, I believe, maybe I think right before Christmas, and has some pretty cool stuff in here and doing some work on some neat stuff and some cars. This GTR is going to become something pretty insane that I probably can't talk about until it's done.
We can talk about it.
We can? All right, cool. Well, we can talk about it. But it's a GTR that made, I guess it runs, what did it run in a half mile?
206.
So 206 and a half mile, very fast, and then had an unfortunate incident where it came in contact with the wall at Laguna Seca, and it is now a lot of very nice parts that the owner wants to put into an old Mercedes. So gonna be a super cool car once it's done. And then this is Riley's project that he started when he was 14. Yeah. This awesome truck. I am not the biggest fan of old trucks, but Riley is slowly converting me. Every time I see him with one, I want one. Like we mentioned before, Hong Supra that has this, if you knew what this lip kit was, you would understand that it is very, very rare to see this and how ridiculously expensive it is. But super cool car, tracks this a lot. It's here for a roll bar. And of course, you can't talk about Riley without talking about this monster, which you've probably actually seen in, if you watch some of our videos, we had a track day, the RS Future and Friends track day, that he drove this at. So this is a car that he actually tries to drive on track as often as he can. Took it to the last club racer. Kind of cool. It's rare that this thing is here with the wheels off, but he had the engine out to put some bearings in it. Again, this badass interior. Here's what the front looks like. All custom geometry, unequal length, double wishbone suspension that he designed. Here is the manifold and exhaust setup that this car kind of got famous for in the Vibrant booth at SEMA. Insane bit of tube work. That is beautiful. But yeah, this thing is super rad. Definitely my favorite Trans Am. Granted, I'm not a huge Trans Am enthusiast, but this car converted me. All right, so the car is in good hands. As you can tell by the expertise that Riley has and the way that he explained everything, he knows what he's doing. You've seen his work before, whether you know it or not. It is excellent and second to none. Thank you to Riley for getting this done. I can't thank you enough.
I love being a part of it. I love getting to be a part of this car. It's something that you know, I love Amir's passion for driving, Amir's passion for going fast, and you know, developing the car. So I'm just happy I get to be a part of it.
So Riley's way too kind. I am the one that is incredibly fortunate. I also can't believe I went this whole episode without mentioning that he is the one that did all of the fabrication on the turbo side. If you've seen the manifold, the titanium exhaust, all of the plumbing to the intercooler and to the intake, that is all him, which is why I have 100% confidence in everything he's done. Anything he's touched on the car has been amazing. He is one of those guys that I lean on tremendously. I couldn't do this by myself, and there are a handful of people that have just been instrumental in making the car what it is, and he's one of them. And of course, I have to give a shout out to Scott for coming with me on this 10-hour trip and being the guy that is basically with me on every 10 to 36-hour trip we've been on. So thank you for watching, and the next time you see us, this thing will probably have a cage. So see you next time.